What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about the future of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now, I'm sure we're going to dabble a little bit in the Miller-Ross, rumors, kind of just one aspect of it in terms of the Justice League themselves, let's say. So if you don't want to know, what's been highly speculated going forward, turn away now. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to talk more about the state of the game itself, but I'm sure that's going to come up, and I do want to address it. And before I get too far, just to kind of cover all bases, I did, get a review code, obviously, from WB. I don't know if these videos, need me to say that in them, but I just want to make 100% sure. So they did give me a code. I appreciate it, and let's talk about this thing. So, all right. Actually, let's start with really the player base, and there's kind of two different things to look at here. There's Steam, which doesn't paint a good picture, and then there's some images that have been coming out in terms of player base, I believe specifically on PlayStation, and that one is more positive. So what's really happened over the last couple of days has definitely been, a split of opinions, and I think we knew that was going to happen, but it's also appeared in, the review sites. So, Metacritic is terrible, right? And I don't want to say review bomb because I just honestly do not know, but you're seeing a lot of negativity in terms of the scores there. Both, I would say, well, critics obviously, right? And Metacritic and OpenCritic, those are the places that would take all of the, the journalist scores. But then also the user scores are very, very low, right? Metacritic is the lowest by miles. I think it's even in the red, maybe it's a 3 or a 4 or a 5, right? But when you go on Steam, when you go on the PlayStation or even Xbox, right, how it's the star system, it's actually the game's getting reviewed quite nicely. So that's I mean, honestly, I don't have too much to say about it other than that's a cool story. I honestly feel that it's the people that bought it. The people that truly were going in for this cooperative kind of fun shooter experience, I do think are getting mostly what they wanted. We can have the discussion of the story and all that, but I think overall, if you wanted it to be a looter, which is fine, if you wanted it to be a looter shooter, I do think you kind of got that, right? So I feel maybe that's where the positivity is coming in. Now, in terms of the player base, I would say, okay, you look at Steam, and I'll say this for sure, it's not doing good. I mean, you look at the numbers compared to, Avengers is the one that everybody's kind of pointing out, but you can compare it to a lot of different games. The game is absolutely not performing, on Steam. There's not enough players, and this is the first week. And, it's not bearing one of these kind of comeback stories, right? Which I honestly don't foresee for a game like this, but maybe it happens. But you do have the Cyberpunks of the world, and even Halo Infinite, right? Some games don't even reach their peak in the beginning. Some games reach a peak, kind of go away, and then come back, and they're actually bigger than what they were at their biggest point, in the past. So it can happen, but here's the thing. Those are the exceptions. There's a reason why those are so rare, and those are really these hot stories, right? Because they don't happen. They don't happen all that often. So Suicide Squad, I think it was 12,000 or so. That's the number, unless there is this come from behind, comeback story. That is the number, and it's only going to go down from there, and that's just not good. Now, does that tell the whole story? Well, it kind of doesn't, because if you look at, and I don't really want to call it sales. It's more almost a leaderboard, right? Because you don't know actual numbers. But when you look at the most popular games, or the games that are being bought and downloaded the most right now on the PlayStation Store, Suicide Squad is in there. It's either top 2 sometimes. It's top 5. It's doing rather well. But here's the thing. You don't know. You don't know the actual number. You know that compared to other games in the beginning of February, it's doing quite well. But you don't know and I'm not saying this just to keep beating this game down. It could be a slow week. It could be a week that no game is really selling, and so Suicide Squad did fine, but it didn't do excellent, and it still makes it to, kind of the top of the leaderboards. Now, it doesn't have to be that. It could also be a very strong period of time, and Suicide Squad's just doing really well. I'm if you couldn't tell, I'm interested in seeing how much this game sells. I really want to know. I really would like to see a tweet where they say we've reached 1 million unique users. That's important. Unique players. And these kind of games will tend to say that. Those are nice numbers. It's just the way that these kind of games do it. Or they say hey, we had 1.2 million people play on this day. Not all at one time, but like stretched throughout the day on every platform. 1.2, unique players played this game in the 24 hours. And then that's just a thing that these games like to, not to diss them. Like, people like to congratulate, like these games congratulate basically themselves on social media. And I'm fine with that. It gives us information to talk about. So I'm totally cool with that. I want that. I really do. I want to see how well this game did sales-wise and how many people are still playing it. If for literally no other reason, I'm just curious. Like, I want to see what this game ended up doing, because then you can have the discussions of, well, how long should it last? How long will it last? Was it a complete failure? Was it a success? These numbers are actually pretty important to that kind of conversation. Now, I still want to have that conversation, in this video, so let's keep going. What's the future with this game? Well, you have all of these seasons, right? Now, in my honest opinion, I don't think this game makes it more than a year. I think it can have a healthy year, and what I hope honestly this is a wish, okay? The game seems to know what it wants to do, like for these future seasons. And this is where the Miller-Ross info starts to, no pun intended, leak in, okay? It seems like they have a game plan. And we know even from them, they do have a game plan. They kind of know how long these things are going to last. There's a format to each of them, right? Each season has basically a format of what you can expect to get, all right? I respect that. I mean, I said that when they did it. I might not like live, I'm not a big live service guy, and I don't play them all that often, but I can respect that it seems like they got everything kind of lined up. Like they know what is going to be happening. Now, I would say they probably only know that to a certain degree. They probably have, whether it's 5 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, they have that planned and like ready to go. Beyond that, whatever number that is, I think it's a waiting game, because I don't think that you greenlight, say, 2 or 3 years worth of content if you're not sure that the game is going to make you enough money to make it that far. If the game is not all that financially successful after, say, 3, 4, 5 months, you're not going to keep the game going for 2 more years after. It literally is not going to happen. No game does that, because you can't bleed money for 2 years, right? You kind of cut your losses and say, all right, we're going to end it on this season. We're going to do this. And by all accounts, it looks like maybe at the end of year 1 is where they realistically could call it quits, right? If you follow those kind of rumors, maybe after a full year, whether it's 3 or 4 seasons, whatever it is, by the end of that, they have an opportunity to leave. If they don't, if they don't want to continue, they have that opportunity to take the exit door and be done. And I gotta say, honestly, I think that's what's gonna happen. I guess, again, we need a little bit more information on the console and the PC stuff. Like, again, I go to that small number, and it's less than half of what Avengers did. And I mean, that's not good. But again, does it tell the full story where there is console players, but because we don't know the actual numbers of that either, we only know numbers of one specific kind of source, it is hard to have like a complete judgment on it, right? That's why I really want to know, did the game do like 200,000? Did it do 500,000? Did it do 1 million? Did it do, like 50,000? Like, what did it do, right? I think there is actually a report that's like a news thing that it was the #1 physically selling UK game. But again, that doesn't necessarily tell us how many. Did it beat something by 5,000? Did it get 97,000 copies, and did something else get 90? Did it do 200,000? Did it do 50,000? And the next biggest thing was 30. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know. So, in terms of like the leaderboard, like your #1, your #2, your #5, it's high. It's high in several places. Really, Steam is kind of the oddity there, but it doesn't tell us how many. Like, you know what I mean? We can't fully know until they basically say something. So there's all that. What's next for Suicide Squad? I think it's probably like a year's worth of content. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that gives them enough time to, decide if the game is worth to keep investing in. But what I want to talk about, to kind of take it a different direction, is, okay, in terms of quite literally what they're going to do next, in terms of the rumors, right, of the Justice League. And you know what? Rumors kind of be damned, right? Like, you can go based off the rumors, but there is evidence. Like, you play the game and you do notice these things, and many people have left comments, right? Like Flash's finger and the way that the Ring reacted with Green Lantern and Superman, being stabbed and, not dying from kryptonite. Now, they say in the game that, their DNAs could have been altered. So technically, I will say this. technically it literally could have been them. And maybe it was them, because there's kind of two theories, right? They're either clones, and not the real Justice League, or they literally are the real Justice League, but their DNA has been shifted. But because their DNA was shifted, it's probably possible to resurrect them. So they literally can, they could have been the real ones. Batman could have been shot point blank in the head, and that could have been the real Batman, not a clone of him. And they could still bring him back because Brainiac did something with his DNA. Flash, same thing, right? They cut the finger off. His finger, like he got a new finger, but it's still legitimately the Flash, not a clone. He died, but he's able to be resurrected. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest with you. I'm kind of still, processing my feelings of the base game, but I'm willing to at least see what they do. I don't know if I'll like it or dislike it. I definitely kind of want to see what they, do with this story. But the one thing I want to throw in that I've controversially said, over the past few days, and this is kind of an angle at the people that say, well, you shouldn't get so mad at how they handled not me, anybody. You shouldn't get so mad how they handled the Justice League, right? Because it either it's not them or it was them, but they're just going to bring them back. My main issue that I have, wrote in many, many comments, I think as respectfully as I possibly can, I don't know if people will give the game the chance. I think one of the issues with this game is because it's live service, but also because it is what it is and people went in, I think, for the story. At least some people went in for the story, right? That's what they got. So if people aren't really into the live service thing, or if the game disappointed them in literally any way, here's the thing. People have short attention spans. And I mean, that is a dig, I think, at like Civilization. But, generally, and I think this is fair, you play any game. If the game doesn't get you, say, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours in, do you keep going? Most of the population, the answer is actually no. There's stats to back that up. Most people do not finish games. Even if a game is, say, 8-9 hours long, most people do not get to the end of it. All right, well, now imagine a game like this. Imagine maybe people did play from beginning, to the middle, to the end. What if the game upset them? Well, do you expect them to come back? And you could say, well, Alex, they're introducing new content and they're kind of fixing things in a way, right? Or not even fixing, they're continuing the story, right? Because there's definitely going to be that narrative where it's like, oh, they're backpedaling. Oh, they brought Batman back because they saw the backlash. But in reality, that was always their plan. Now, I would say I would very much question their plan. I think they're right. I think like the idea of what happened is correct. It was actually their plan to do that, knowing they'd upset people, I suppose, and then bring him back, okay? Now, why did they choose that plan? I have no idea, because ultimately it goes back. You can fight about it all day long, but it goes back to what I've just been saying these last few minutes. The thing is, like, the real facts are, people don't always come back. In fact, the actual percentage and stats show that most people don't come back. So to rely on future updates and future DLC to finish your story and to, like literally that, because you would be finishing it. But let's also say, to kind of mend things over, to make people feel better. Well, you are assuming that people are going to follow you all the way through, and people maybe already did. They followed you through the base game. They may not do it for 2.5, 3. Does that make sense, right? They may not do it long term. I think that's fair, because that is something that I've always said in terms of live service games. I don't like live service games that leave the story and you have to finish it a year and a half later in DLC. I think that's terrible. I think that is an awful, awful practice. Not just with Suicide Squad, any, was it Asura's Wrath or whatever game that was? Remember that game where it was the worst, one of the worst, maybe even the worst, cliffhanger ending of all time, and they finished the story in DLC like a few months that you had to buy. And that stuff just always scars me. I always just hate that stuff, because it's like, you bought the base game, you couldn't even give us an end of the story. So maybe you look back, 5 years from now and you say, the story didn't deserve to get attacked so badly. Maybe that happens, but I think how you got to the whole story should never be replicated. I do just genuinely want to see it play out, where it's like, I'd love to see numbers of how many people that played the base game, how many stuck around to play season 3, let's say, right? How many made it to that point, because I think the number is going to be very low, because that's just history tells us that kind of stuff. But it might not be. It might not be. And then also how people take to what could happen, with the Justice League. What happens there? Well, we'll see what happens. But it's definitely a messy situation. As I've said, it's definitely not one that I would have done. You're relying on people giving your game a chance for at least, say, a year, right? You have to follow the game through, not just the base game. And that's the biggest part. You upset people. Many, not everybody, but you upset a good number of people in the base game. And you, not only did you do that, but you wanted them, regardless of that, to keep going, because you have to continue to tell your story. And that's just a very risky move that I personally do not think is going to work. Does it work? Maybe. And if it does, again, maybe we look back 5 years and say, what a weird path. What a strange strategy. But you know what? It kind of worked out at the end. Maybe that happens, and that would be kind of cool. But if it doesn't happen, well, we'd have that to talk about as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.